She rebuilt herself through apology and endurance. For years, Sarah Ferguson had been the lesson learned, the cautionary tale turned comeback story. The Duchess who fell then rose again, reshaped by time and humility. And yet, when the world turned its gaze away from Prince Andrew, she turned back towards him. A quiet act of loyalty that reopened every wound she had spent decades trying to heal. The woman who had once mastered restraint now stepped willingly into the storm she had outlived. To some, it was love. Rare, unconditional, perhaps misplaced. To others, it was the echo of old dependence. A pattern that even time could not untangle. For a figure punished so fiercely by the press, her defence of him seemed unthinkable, almost self-sabotaging. But Fergie's world has never been one of easy choices. Her redemption was built not on distance, but devotion. And in the monarchy's careful choreography, devotion is the one gesture that can both redeem and ruin. That is her contradiction, the need to be loyal colliding with the cost of being seen. After the divorce, she refused to vanish. Where others might have sought quiet exile, Sarah Ferguson sought purpose. And a microphone, books, talk shows, charity appearances. Each moment became a carefully staged step towards rehabilitation. The laughter that once filled tabloids now filled studios. Her tone gentler, her humour self-aware, her image softened by the language of humility. She spoke not of betrayal, but of lessons. Not of blame, but of gratitude. It was a performance of sincerity, but one that came from truth. She had learned that contrition, when worn lightly, could disarm even the most unforgiving audience. Every interview became a small rehearsal for forgiveness. Every smile, an application for grace. Fergie understood that survival within the royal orbit required more than charm. It demanded endurance. So she turned her notoriety into narrative. Children's books, wellness projects, charity campaigns. She built a second career from the rubble of the first. It was not grandeur she sought, but usefulness. A duchess without a title of function could still be a woman of purpose. For a time, Britain allowed her that. She became the Duchess of Dignity, a symbol of cheerful resilience, her earlier excesses reframed as human error. Daytime television embraced her warmth. Publishers welcomed her candour. The redemption arc seemed complete. But the cameras that once condemned her never truly left. They lingered, patient, curious, waiting for movement in the glass. Fergie's greatest gift was visibility, her greatest risk the same. Because the public's affection is a fragile currency, earned in empathy, spent in exposure. And beneath the glow of soft lighting and charity banquets, another truth flickered. She was still performing in the same theatre that once demanded her downfall. Her reinvention was real, but never safe. It lived at the mercy of headlines, always one misstep away from reversal. As the applause grew louder, the silence beneath it deepened. A quiet awareness that grace, once granted, could be withdrawn just as swiftly. Her reputation had been mended, but her balance sheets told another story. Behind the polished interviews and charity dinners lay a quieter struggle. Numbers that never quite added up. Ventures that promised relief but delivered regret. Rumours gathered like rain. Misjudged deals, unpaid bills, the faint echo of financial storms returning. Supporters called her generous, too trusting, too kind-hearted to guard herself. Detractors used a sharper word, reckless. Through it all, one figure remained constant, Prince Andrew. He was the confidant, the landlord, the silent benefactor who steadied her world when it tilted. Their arrangement, royal aides insisted, was practical. Critics found another term, impossible. Inside Royal Lodge, their shared home in Windsor, the boundaries between past and present blurred. There were separate bedrooms, perhaps, but not separate lives. They shared a staff, a garden, a history too tangled to unravel. In a palace culture built on propriety, their coexistence was both perplexing and poignant. A union dissolved on paper, but not in practice. Each relied on the other for something the outside world no longer freely offered. For him, companionship. For her, stability. The kind of stability that came not from affection, but necessity. When public affection cooled, it was Andrew's loyalty that kept her afloat. When business prospects faltered, his patronage filled the gaps. Discretion couldn't. It was an intimacy made of gratitude. And gratitude, when prolonged, becomes something heavier. By the late 2000s, the lines of independence were fading. Her career remained visible, her energy undimmed, yet whispers persisted that without Andrew's financial shelter, the Duchess's newfound dignity might not stand. The woman who had spent years proving she could survive alone now found herself tied once more to the man whose name had both crowned and crushed her. And when scandal gathered around him, darker this time, more consequential, her loyalty was no longer a virtue, but a liability. To let him fall would mean admitting how much of her footing still rested on his. So she stayed, beside him, not in romance, but in allegiance. It was not naivety that bound her, but history. For Fergie, independence had always been a borrowed luxury, not a lasting state. The monarchy's shadow is long, and even those who step out of it find the light expensive to maintain. When the storm gathered around Prince Andrew, Sarah Ferguson did what came naturally. She spoke. Her words, delivered softly and without hesitation, carried the weight of both history and habit. "He's a good man," she said, "a kind and gentle man." To her, it was fairness. To much of the nation, it was tone-deaf loyalty, the sound of someone standing too close to the fire she could no longer see. In the glare of a changing age, one newly fluent in accountability, her words landed like echoes from another era. Sympathy turned swiftly to disbelief. The Duchess, who had spent years rebuilding trust, now seemed to be unravelling it, one well-meant sentence at a time. Inside Buckingham Palace, silence hardened. Royal aides leaked quiet concern to journalists, noting that Fergie's instinct for warmth had once again outpaced royal caution. Headlines multiplied. Fergie defends the indefensible. The Duchess who never learns. Her redemption arc, so carefully rehearsed, so publicly earned, began to buckle under the weight of its own sincerity. In television studios, commentators spoke of misguided devotion, while body language experts passed her every glance for denial or doubt. She insisted she knew the real Andrew, and perhaps she did. But in the theatre of public opinion, truth mattered less than optics. To a culture recalibrating its moral lens, affection looked like complicity. Defending him, even gently, felt like defying a new social order, one that measured empathy against justice and found hers wanting. For Fergie, the instinct was not political, but personal. She was defending not only a man, but the fragments of a life they had built together. The home, the daughters, the unspoken understanding that neither of them would truly be alone. But devotion, once admired, now carried a different cost. Every gesture of loyalty appeared like blindness. Every reassurance, a risk. The palace closed ranks. Statements were drafted with surgical precision. Appearances were cancelled. And there, again, was Sarah Ferguson. Smiling for cameras, pearls shining beneath studio lights. Her composure a fragile act of grace. Outsider, once more. As flashbulbs fired outside Buckingham's gates, her image flickered between courage and confusion. A woman who had fought to be forgiven was now being judged for forgiving too easily. The reckoning came quietly, not as scandal, but as distance. Invitations thinned. Interviews grew gentler, stripped of laughter. And from the palace, neither condemnation nor comfort, only the kind of silence that speaks of separation. At Royal Lodge, she remained. The same gates, the same corridors, but now shared with a man the world no longer welcomed. Where once the house had seemed a symbol of endurance, it now felt like a monument to refusal. Two figures, bound by memory, resisting the gravity of disgrace. Her daughters, Beatrice and Eugénie, walked a careful line between affection and appearance. They spoke warmly of their parents, but rarely too loudly. They carried, with remarkable poise, the contradictions that had once defined their mother. Loyalty without defiance, empathy without exposure. For Sarah Ferguson, the world grew smaller. Public sympathy cooled from compassion to courtesy. She was still invited, still photographed, still present. But as a tolerated relic of a more forgiving time. Polite exile, performed with pearls and patience. Yet even in that quiet sidelining, there was a kind of courage. She appeared at weddings and christenings, smiling with a grace that had learned its cost. Every gesture measured, every word weighed, and still she turned up, as mother, as friend, as reminder. Her place within the monarchy was no longer formal, but it was undeniable. She had become the emblem of what endures when reputation fades, proof that presence itself can be a form of defiance. For a woman once defined by scandal, mere survival had become an act of rebellion. The cameras that once captured her downfall now returned to her occasionally, not in malice, but in curiosity. She was still there, still standing, the eternal understudy to a role she had once played too earnestly. In the autumn light of Windsor, her story settled into something quieter, almost peaceful, not vindicated, not erased, simply lived. In the long ledger of royal history, Sarah Ferguson will not be remembered for grandeur, but for endurance. While others guarded tradition, she embodied its disquiet, the human impulse to love past reason, to forgive beyond wisdom. She revealed a truth the monarchy seldom names, that affection can outlast approval, and that loyalty, once admired, can just as easily condemn. Her devotion to Prince Andrew was both her noblest instinct and her quiet undoing, a virtue turned inward until it became a wound. For decades, she sought acceptance from a system built on distance, and found instead the paradox of proximity, close enough to remain visible, never close enough to belong. Yet even in exile, she kept faith with something the institution itself depends upon. Image softened by emotion, control tempered by grace. Her story asks a question Britain still struggles to answer. Is forgiveness a virtue, or simply forgetfulness with better manners? In a nation that demands contrition, but rarely allows renewal, Sarah Ferguson's life stands as a study in how fragile redemption truly is. As the Windsor lights fade into dawn, the cameras turn elsewhere. A single candle gutters in a palace window, its flame replaced by early light drifting over the Thames. The scandal has passed. The woman remains. And in that quiet survival, unthroned, unforgotten, lies something almost regal. Not grandeur, but grace. Not triumph, but the calm that follows judgment. Her contradiction is, in part, our own. The struggle to reconcile mercy with memory, to love without losing oneself to it.